Okay, so everybody, this is section 205. You'll be happy to know that you're already familiar with the content from section 204, where we were proving congruent angles congruent. We were proving same side interior angles supplementary. We were proving alternate interior angles congruent and corresponding angles congruent. So with that said, we're going to use that same idea to develop why these angles in each of the figures are either supplementary or congruent. So if you notice, the arrows tell us that these lines are parallel. So L is parallel to M in each of the figures, okay? So 40 degrees is, the toothpick is our transversal. You can think of the angles in the exterior here along with 40, the other one on the left side of the toothpick or transversal. The hamburger bun, and then your interior angles is where you would put the hamburger and cheese and lettuce and all that good stuff. So the hamburger bun are the exterior angles, very top left, very top right, and very bottom left and very bottom right. So with that said, when you have two angles on the same side of the transversal, and if you look at the top four angles, all right, and slide them down onto the bottom four, the coinciding angles are called corresponding angles, and they're always congruent. So we're going to say that this angle is 40 degrees as well. Okay, and this is a review. You guys got this. Shouldn't be a problem for you. Obviously don't got this. All right, here we go. That should work. All right, so now the lines are parallel. We're trying to prove that alternate interior angles are congruent. So if parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then alternate interior angles would be congruent. So this would also be 61 degrees. And then moving on to figure C, we're in the interior where the hamburger and lettuce and tomato are, and those are on the same side of the toothpick, so they will be supplementary. It's the only angle pair that's supplementary. So we're going to subtract 98 from 180 degrees, and we're going to get 82. All right. And lastly, right here, the 125 and X are both outside the interior where the burger would be. So there are exterior angles, they're where the hamburger top and bottom would be. And they are on either side of the toothpick. That means they're alternate exterior angles and they are congruent. All right, so that takes care of our warm up. Now, today's lesson covers section 205, converses of parallel lines. And today is August 30th. I'll see you next month, right? Don't go yet. All right, so here we are. We want to make sure before we go into next week that our work is done for sections 201 through 205. We only have one last section, short chapter to cover on Tuesday. So please try to have all these quizzes and IXL practices done. Thank you. All right. All right, so we're approving that lines are parallel. That is our learning targets. Before we are proving angles congruent. Today we are proving lines parallel, okay? So by the end of this recording, you should feel comfortable in the ways that you can prove lines parallel. Okay, so previously learned, here's what was met. You were given a set of parallel lines cut by a transversal. And what you needed to show or prove is that alternate interior angles are congruent. Now the converse is what we're learning today. Switches what follows the if with the then. So it's going to switch two parallel lines cut by a transversal with what follows the then. Alternate interiors are congruent. So if you switch them, the converse would read like this. If alternate interior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. So the next one, the converse would say, if alternate exterior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel, okay? The next statement's converse would switch the part of the statement that follows the if with the part of the statement that follows the then. So corresponding angles are congruent. If corresponding angles are congruent, then parallel lines are cut by a transversal. And lastly, if same side interior angles are supplementary, and that's missing. All right, so supplementary is what should be here. Then the lines are parallel. So the converses are proving lines parallel, as mentioned in our learning targets. And all the converses, I'm going to show you what they look like. So just to reiterate, a converse switches when the part of the sentence after the if is swapped with the part of the sentence after the then. So just an example is, if you live in Georgia, then you live in Atlanta, okay? Can you write the converse of that? Switch what follows the if. I live in Georgia. Switch that with what follows the then. I live in Atlanta. Okay, so the converse would look like this. If I live in Atlanta, then I live in Georgia. Okay, that's the converse. All right. It's just switching what follows the if with what follows the then. All right, moving on. So this is the converses that you are responsible for knowing. It's not any new material. You already know what corresponding angles are, alternate interior and exterior, and same side interior angles are. It's just not what you're trying to prove anymore. You're trying to prove the lines are parallel. So now we need to show lines are parallel by showing that corresponding angles are congruent. We can prove the lines parallel if we can show alternate interior angles congruent. We can prove lines parallel by showing alternate exterior angles are congruent. We can prove the lines parallel by showing same side interior angles are supplementary. All right. Now, this is an excellent video on lines of latitude. And it's a 3-minute video. If you can go ahead and just type that URL into your browser. And it goes into latitude lines, and then we have longitude lines. Longitude, just like they sound, they're long, so I like to think of them as vertical. And the latitude lines are also called parallels. Our latitude lines, let me highlight them. Get my drawing tool here. I want to draw. So our latitude lines are called parallels. They're barely showing up. Let me change my color. What's your favorite color? Let's see. They're not really showing up. But our latitude lines are parallel, and the video goes into the distance between the lines of latitude. And how do we know they're parallel? Since this lesson is about proving lines parallel, you're going to find out that the distance between latitude lines is 69 miles. And actually, the distance around the equator is 25,000 miles. Pretty cool. So geometry comes to life through geography. And what's amazing is if you look, the longitude and latitude lines kind of look like a coordinate plane or parallel lines cut by a transversal. Okay. So our latitude lines and the red line, the longitude lines are, you can think of the longitude in red as the transversal, and the blue latitude lines that are horizontal, they're called parallels. And you could do corresponding angles, right? And by the way, anywhere in the world you can be found using longitude and latitude lines, provided there is some sort of tracking device. But anything on the map can be used, longitude and latitude, to pinpoint a place in the world, okay? So that being said, I'm moving on. So how are converses in this lesson different than previous lessons? What do you think? The converses prove lines parallel. That's the most important thing you have to remember. By showing corresponding angles are congruent. And I could go on and on. I could say, and same sign interior angle supplementary. And alternate interior angles, congruent. Etc., etc., etc. All right. All right, so moving on once again. So here's your next question. Name two ways to test if a pair of lines is parallel using the interior angles formed by a transversal crossing two parallel lines. No, not parallel. We're trying to prove that. So think about your interior angles that we mentioned. They're same side interior and alternate interior. In order to prove the lines parallel, alternate interior angles must be congruent. Same side interior angles must be supplementary. Okay? Moving on, moving on. All right. Are these lines parallel? Why or why not? So let's think about that for a minute. Let me use my eraser so you can see it. And there's some hints. Are corresponding angles congruent? Are same side interior angles supplementary? Are alternate exterior angles supplementary? And this one was supposed to say alternate interior angles. So that should say alternate interior. All right. And let me get my eraser. So what do you think? Which angles are alternate interior angles? Okay. I just erased it. All right. So our alternate interior angles in this figure are inside where the burger is, the bun's on the outside, top and bottom. The transversal is the toothpick. Okay. So these are your alternate interior angles, and they should be congruent. Are they? One's 110 and one is 108, so no, they're not congruent. So since alternate interior angles are not congruent, then the lines are not parallel. And remember, converse is, what we're trying to do today is prove lines parallel. So we didn't prove anything. They would have to be congruent. They'd both have to be 110 or 108. All right, moving along. Okay, last question. Letters A, B, C, and D are angle measures. Okay, and I want you to notice we are given one angle measure of 75 degrees. What other angle, what should equal 105 degrees to prove that F is parallel to G? So this lesson's all about proving lines parallel. Remember, we know we can prove lines parallel by showing alternate interior angles congruent, same side interior supplementary, same side exterior supplementary, corresponding angles congruent. Okay? So 75 is an alternate exterior angle with C. That wouldn't prove the lines parallel because it's asking, C is 75. It's asking what would need to be 105. So we know it's not C because C is 75 degrees. Okay? C is 75. Okay. So we know it's not C. All right. Now, A, okay, careful here. A is not a pair of, A and 75 are not a pair of supplementary angles. That means they're not, well, I should say they're not same side interior angles. They're not corresponding angles. They are not alternate exterior interior angles. They are what we call linear pairs. Linear pairs do not show that lines are parallel. Okay, so that's why it's not A either. It's not A because 75 degrees and A. The 75-degree angle and angle A are not one of the special angle pairs. Like corresponding angles would be. Now, does anybody know, do you know what they are actually? A lot of people didn't know this in live class today. I'm just wondering if you're able to answer it better than your peers. Okay, so A and 75 degrees are actually linear pairs. Okay. And I apologize for my crazy dog barking. Okay. So that's why it's not A. All right. So the answer is actually D. Okay. All right. So D would have to be 105. Okay. Because both D and the 75-degree angle that we originally given are same side exteriors. So they would have to be supplementary. Angles must be supplementary to prove lines parallel. And I'm sorry, it takes me a while to type. All right. Now, I said there was one last question earlier, but I lied. I think it's important. This is actually a quiz question. So let me erase all this. This is an actual quiz question, so I'll go over it real quick. All right. Think of this as our transversal. Think of this as our parallel lines, and I'll mark them with arrows. Okay, and it says, are the lines parallel? Is G parallel to H? Do you know the symbol for parallel? This is that little, looks like an 11, okay? That means parallel. Angle 1 is 4x plus 36. Angle 1 over here is 4x plus 36. Angle 2 is 3x minus 3. Do you know what the relationship is between angle 1 and angle 2? How would we solve for x? Okay, so I just want to say that angle 1 and angle 2 are same side interior angles. And are supplementary. All right, so to solve for x, we would have to go ahead and add 4x plus 6 and 3x minus 3 together because they are same side interior angle measures, and they should be set to 180 degrees. Okay, and that should do it. And then once you solve for x, you should be able to just go back in and plug in for measure of angle 3, 3 times x minus 3. And the correct answer should be 60. All right. So 60 was the correct answer. Thank you all. That's all I have for you. Just go ahead and make sure that you complete your Quiz 205 and have a great 3-day weekend. And make sure you get all 201 through 205 assignments completed for Tuesday. Adios. Thank you. Bye-bye.